Okay, for this second part of the lecture, we're going to be looking more closely to Plato and the myth that is included in the Protagoras. So, if you're using your PowerPoint, that's what these things do. In the Protagoras, we have Socrates having a conversation with the sophist Protagoras. Protagoras was actually maybe the opponent that was most worthy of being faced off with Socrates, and the whole dialogue is a very interesting conversation about what justice, what the art of citizenship and virtue are, because Socrates has this question, right? If you go to be taught how to be a good citizen, what does that look like? Who can teach that? You would imagine that good citizens can teach one another to be good citizens, but he actually brings up a lot of examples in the dialogue where exceptional parents have had kids who are not that great citizens, and where obviously like great citizens have come from backgrounds that you wouldn't expect. So that's the conversation that's happening in the Agora between Protagoras and Socrates. Protagoras, in order to clarify things, is said to bring in the myth of Prometheus, and here there's a lot of scholarship being done, or that has been done, on why Plato uses the myth. And to me, the simplest explanation is this: the Greeks knew the myth of Protagoras. This is something that they actually had festivals around, right? Protagoras was one of the demigods, a titan who had been good to humans. So part of their religion, part of their tradition concentrated on this idea of what Prometheus had done for them. So what the side of the scholarship that I agree with says that the reason why Socrates introduced, or Plato kept the dialogues in, kept the myth in the dialogues, is because they're really part of the culture. And by basing philosophy in the culture, it's not only that philosophy takes to the marketplace, but philosophy exists in the marketplace. So Plato was making these political claims that the kinds of religious and mythical beliefs that we have ought to be explored and take from them the best sort of material. So this is one of my favorite parts, because it clicks why these brothers get themselves into so much trouble, right? So going back to the ancient Greek roots, we have that both names have the same sort of ending, which is made up of two words, manthano and the ending eus, which means that which. So manthano is that which has knowledge, therefore the learner. And then where they differ is the first couple of letters, right? So Prometheus and then Epimetheus. And pro means before, and epi is going to be after. The other definitions, but they mostly amount to the same thing. So Prometheus is known as the forethinker, and Epimetheus is seen as the afterthinker. And I think that makes a lot of sense with what they do, right? They're giving the task by the gods to go and distribute all these gifts to the new creations, and Epimetheus just like distributes everything however they come, and at the end man is still standing in line and there's nothing. So that's where we get in trouble in the myth. And the name obviously was telling of the sort of knowledge that Epimetheus had. If you are an afterthinker, right, like there's like afterthought is 20/20. After something happens, you have like all the clarity that you didn't have before. So there's something here with the characters that needs to be analyzed as well. And Prometheus obviously is a forethinker, so we should believe that if Prometheus had been the one distributing the gifts, we would have gotten the gifts in that bag and that's it. So the god asked them to distribute the gifts to the creatures. Epimetheus goes like on a wild distribution of gifts, and humanity is left with nothing. So Prometheus decides to go and steal the fire from Athena and Hephaestus, right? So that's going to give us wisdom, political organization, and familial organization. If you look at the reading though, there's something that I want to point out. The reading from Plato on the margins, both left and right margins, has these little numbers that are known as the, let me find it, the reading on the margins, right? This is your reading from Blackboard. There's an explanation here as to what the Protagoras does, and then if you go to the dialogue, you can see on the margins there are these numbers and then these little letters, and then obviously you have like the page in the book. Well, for philosophers, because we use different editions of these works, we use these little margins on the sides to talk about the content in that page. That's a different system of pagination than the one we have here. This pagination on top is what we would normally refer to in a book, but in the dialogues and in some of the work by Aristotle, we refer by these books. So it's called Stephano number when it comes to Platonic dialogues. So let me go back to the PowerPoint. So in 320, there's this whole origin of creation. The gods existed, but we didn't. There were no more mortal races. They are created. Epimetheus starts a distribution in 320E to 321. And by 320C, he has already distributed everything, right? So we as humans have nothing. In 321D, we have that scene where Prometheus steals from Hephaestus and Athena, but although he gives humans wisdom, he doesn't give us the art of politics, right? So Zeus sees that we keep killing each other. There's no way in which we can be in a peaceful sort of environment, so he decides to put a stop to it. And you have to think, like, he has two options, right? He can delete us from the face of the earth, or he can try to fix it. So in order to fix it, he gives us a sense of justice and a sense of shame. And this is going to be key to understand what the Greeks thought was human nature. Everyone, every man and woman, anywhere in the world is going to have some sort of wisdom, an idea of what justice is, and a sense of shame. So we can't say that from the myth, like, these two things don't go together. Everyone, that's what human nature means, and you have to remember this from your next discussion. Human nature means all those moral traits that every individual in society shares. So for the Greeks in this myth is going to be wisdom, which is paired up with a sense of justice and a sense of shame. But just as Epimetheus and Prometheus show, it doesn't mean that every human being will use them in the same degree. There are people who are more keen to thinking before they act, and there are people who are going to act just as Epimetheus, thinking that things will be solved anyway. So the myth has these two different readings. On one point, thanks to the gods, we have wisdom. That means we can learn things, but we're also given the art of politics, which must be developed. And the art of politics is predicated, right, on having this sense of shame and justice. If we didn't have a sense of shame, we couldn't be punished, because we wouldn't care less about it, right? So justice in itself seems to not be deterrent enough. That's why Zeus must have given us a sense of shame too. And obviously that we live in a society, so we don't want others to think that we're less worthy or we're different than they are. So as part of this reading, I asked you to upload your comments to the discussion, and a lot of you came up with really good ideas as to what the lesson in Plato is. That we must behave ethically, and the myth says that we have the basic components to behave ethically. It doesn't mean that we will behave ethically, but according to the Greeks, we're all capable of it. So again, it's the art of politics that Ismael is bringing up here. It's the art of politics that Natasha brings up here, is that we humans are physically weak, right? And if we don't live in societies, if we don't get together with others, then we won't be able to make progress. What Sofia Niki is bringing up here is actually a very core component of what we're going to be investigating in the next module of our class. Why do we get together in societies? And what is it about this art of politics, of these like shame, justice, values, morals that Elisa talked about, that allow us to build societies? And then that, again, right, unlike animals, we can't live on our own. And again, this is something that we're going to discuss more once we get to authors like Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. But Rousseau especially brings up the point as to how much at a disadvantage we are without forming communities, because even as little babies, we're not born in a way that we can be self-sufficient. So those are really good things that you guys picked up from Plato. And then obviously we have the criticisms, right? Like, this is how new philosophy is born, from the criticisms that we have. So wisdom, what is it? Jairo asked this question, like, we all have some sort of wisdom, so what is it that Plato has in mind when we talk about wisdom? And this is what the dialogue is about. Is the art of citizenship part of wisdom and therefore everybody has it, or is wisdom something different, and as Aristotle would say, the slave has less of it, right? So this is definitely a point that we're going to keep examining during the semester. Maribel talks about like learning shame or compassion, and I wanted to bring this up because she is right in that last point, right? You have to be born with these traits, but that's precisely what the Greeks believed. You are born with them, so you don't learn it. There is no way of teaching you how to feel compassion for others. But we're going to find philosophers who disagree in this point. From Tom, I like this point a lot. If justice is interpreted the same across the ages, that actually doesn't make a lot of sense, but I will elaborate on this criticism once we get to other philosophers. And yeah, you can disagree with Plato in the way Alex did, but we still have